and not from an orthodox way of living. So you should be aware of it, because somebody religious will tell you a different story about the whole meaning of it, which we don't know anything about.
Yeah. She said she liked the part about Judaism where you have a relationship with God in the present life, something like that. You know, there is a particular day or ceremony or day where you ask forgiveness from each other, something like that.
Yom Kippur.
So she liked that kind of things.
Yeah.
So.
Hi, Anila. We are talking about Pesach and Yom Kippur. You're on mute.
Yeah, okay, it's starting on Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pesach.
Yeah, but I didn't know how to say it in English, the Agadah and what we're doing.
Well, when the Jews left Egypt, you know, Moses was kind of guiding them through the desert for I don't know how many years until they found
the promised land.
The promised land where milk and honey flows, isn't it?
Yeah, but this is more than that, because it's like we've been enslaved there, so it's to go to be freedom.
Yeah, exactly. So there were all these plagues that kind of God brought onto the Egyptians until they said, okay, you better go, you guys. And then there was, what was it like? I think they were going through the Red Sea, and then there was a channel, and then when the Egyptians came, the channel went and they all drowned in the sea or something like that. And then
Was that when the Moses part the Red Sea?
Yes.
So that the Jewish people can pass?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I know bits and pieces, but I don't tie them together.
Okay.
Hi, Anila.
There's Geshe here.
Geshe, hi, good evening. I just will record and do co-host. Just one moment. Good evening, you are now the co-host. You are on mute, Geshe.
Oh, sorry for that. I didn't realize. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Good evening. Hello, wherever you are. And let's start right away. Some mindfulness meditation. And in order to prepare our mind to take refuge, generate bodhicitta, visualize in the space in front of you your spiritual master, your lama, or your lamas, appearing as Buddha Shakyamuni. As a manifestation of all the qualities we ourselves can attain. Buddha was wearing the saffron-colored robes of a fully ordained monk and is seated in the Vajra position on an open lotus, on top of which are a sun disk and a moon disk. And think that the Buddha smiles at you, encouraging and loving. Ready to guide you and inspire you on your spiritual journey. And at the same time, he's looking at all sentient beings who are quietly seated around you. All of them appearing in the form of a human being, think that especially those who you don't like or who don't like you will give you a hard time. They're seated right in front of you. And then remember that despite all our differences, the nature of our mind is as pure as the nature of the mind of a Buddha. With all our faults, our limitations, being adventitious and temporary, and that we all have the potential to remove these hindrances, these obstructions to liberation and enlightenment. Remembering that, generate a sincere sense of affection in the form of affectionate love. That doesn't distinguish between sentient beings, but instead finds them endearing, it's a deep sense of concern. Is tolerant of all their shortcomings, knowing that they can be removed. And then allow that affectionate love to give way to great compassion. Wishes for sentient beings not only to be free from suffering of suffering, to be free from contaminated aggregates and any other factor that keeps them in samsara. Prevents them from being liberated or even enlightened. Then generate the altruistic attitude, a heartfelt aspiration or even determination to do all that is necessary to help sentient beings remove their obstructions to liberation and to enlightenment. Take personal responsibility for the welfare of each and every sentient being. No matter how limited we are right now, to not give up. To continue to work towards removing sentient being suffering and its causes. And since that is realistically only possible if we first become enlightened ourselves, let's generate the heartfelt wish, the heartfelt aspiration to attain the enlightened state of a Buddha, not just for our own welfare, but for the welfare of each and every sentient being. Make that the main goal in this life and in all lives to come. Letting go the visualization of the Buddha in front of us and all sentient beings around us. Let's recite the prayer and deepen our refuge in bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened. to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay. To share with you the Lamrim. Here they are, the Lamrim outlines. All right, so this is the last time we'll talk about karma being so extensive, being so important, and it's also a nice way to then continue for our next class, to continue with the practices that are common to a person of middling spiritual aspiration or spiritual capacity. Well, just look for it. Oh, well, we spoke about karma last time, about the different characteristics, of course, and also about what karma means in terms of motivation and so forth. And then the text here continues to talk about, well, the 10 non-virtues. Very important to be observant of our actions, of course, and to try to avoid any harmful action. I mean, the 10 non-virtues are just the main non-virtues, if you like. And I guess some of them, it's important to pay extra attention to them, especially at this day and age. Here it describes, of course, the intention, the correct accreditation of the object, all of that. But also to be aware when it comes to, for instance, taking what is not given. I mean, none of us would, I guess, rob someone, I mean, go into a bank and rob a bank or burgle a house or I mean, steal something from another person. But at this day and age, with the internet and with copyrights and so forth, or downloading illegal material, well, it's good to be aware, I guess. And then, of course, any sexual conduct that is painful to others, unless one has, of course, vows of celibacy, lying, divisive speech, and so forth. I mean, to be careful of, I mean, criticizing someone in a constructive way. That's one thing. I mean, well, I mean, I don't think it's necessary to always praise another person, but it's really dangerous. I mean, there's great danger when we start talking about someone's fault. If it bothers us, that, well, our anger, our frustration comes into what we say, and then turns into divisive speech, slander, and so forth. So to be really careful of that. Of course, harsh words, to make an extra effort, pay attention to how we say something. Idle talk, I mean, out of attachment and so forth. Anyway, I mean, I think you're all aware of these coveting, maliciousness, wrong views of the mind. To pay attention to that. But then also something to consider is, of course, also the nature of the action. I mean, certain actions are just by their own nature are negative. So an example is killing. There are other actions, just taking something that has not been given is not necessarily, I mean, because in the end, I mean, if I pick something up from the road, I take something that hasn't been given. But killing, even if it's killing with a motivation to benefit someone, it is explained that this is in the nature of negativity, because the thought wanting to kill someone or something, well, if it's in the case of an animal, that is considered to be, in all cases, it's considered to be negative, which is why there's some weird noise coming through. I hope you don't hear that. But anyway, so that is always considered to be a negative action. So even in the case of euthanasia, there's some negativity. And to be aware of that, of course, it can be counterbalanced with an extremely positive motivation, but still, it's important to be aware of it, that there's certain actions that they're, by way of their own nature, I'm talking of a conventional nature here, that they're negative, killing being one example. The basis of the object, extremely important to know that there's certain objects at which our actions are directed, can be extremely positive, but can also be extremely negative depending on the action. So our parents, of course, any positive action directed at our parents is considered to be extremely positive, more positive than someone else due to the kindness they have shown us. Even more powerful is an object like a bodhisattva, an enlightened being, on the basis of the kindness they show to all sentient beings, including ourselves. And kindness that is even, it goes beyond the kindness our parents have shown us. So from that point of view, again, to be careful, especially with our parents, in our interaction with our parents, to avoid negative actions and instead engage in positive ones. So at this day and age, this needs to be stressed again and again, because of course, even if our relationship with our children hasn't changed in general, like human nature is such that, well, parents love their children and would do anything they can for their children. So I don't think that has changed in the 21st century, but our relationship with our parents, that has definitely changed. So cannot be stressed enough that our parents are a very powerful basis for accumulating virtue. Okay, so that's something I'd like you to consider. The intention, of course, being so important. And of course, the intention being important all the way through, from the beginning of the action, in the middle of the action, towards the end, dedicating and so forth. So with all this in mind, being mindful of all these aspects, to then engage in as many virtuous actions as we can. And the frequency, of course, is important, because the more frequently we engage in positive actions, the more we make a habit of it. And in that way, it becomes much more effortless as we continue making an effort to avoid negative actions and engage in positive ones. And of course, whether an opponent force was applied or not, I mean, do we have regret when something negative happens? Of course, I mean, stuff happens all the time. We lose our patience, we lose our discipline and so forth, and we engage in negative actions. So not to despair, but pick yourself up and keep trying. I mean, just do it again, try again, and generate regret when things go wrong. Okay, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done so. I can't change it now. I've done it. Maybe I can fix things in another way. But the point being, I've generated remorse, sincere regret, and if possible, the other opponent forces, the four opponent forces of regret and so forth. And in that way, be able to even purify the negativity. All right. Anyway, it takes too much time to go through all of those, and I'm pretty sure you'll understand a lot of them, just talking about the different actions that arise from certain causes. And then, of course, as I already mentioned, the action, well, the field of action, the person that you act towards, what kind of level of understanding you have of the law of cause and effect, to be aware that all this plays into the effect of an action. So in other words, really, it comes down to being really careful and applying the Dharma as much as we can in our daily interaction with other people. Okay, so I think that's enough for what I would like you to consider for this coming week. So I've said a lot, but basically as part of your own practice, to sit down, or if you don't want to integrate it into your personal practice in the morning, evening, or whenever you do your practices, but just to consider this every now and then throughout the day, kind of apply. It's called introspection, sometimes called meta-awareness, but I think introspection is a better term. Like, what am I thinking? What am I saying? How am I acting with my body physically? How am I presenting myself and so forth? And in that way, to adjust our behavior in such a way that is in accordance with the law of cause and effect, in the sense that, well, based on the fact that I want to be happy, I want to have pleasant experiences, to act accordingly and to avoid accumulating costs that lead to negative results, but not just for our own benefit, but of course also to consider the benefit of all sentient beings. So this is what I would like you to do. Oh, actually, there's a lot of time. Well, depending on how quick we can have class again, and if there's a lot of material, you can all fit it in these coming weeks until we can continue with classes. Okay, great. And then for the next class, we can continue with the next section on the lumber. Oh, there's a lot here. Yeah, so you have plenty of material to reflect on. And that way, continue going through the entire lumber, which is, of course, the goal of bringing this, of integrating this, making this part of our own practice. And then to continue with the text, as I said last time, I won't take any questions today, but instead I'd like to finish this part of the text. This is what we got to. So I've counted the classes. We've had a large amount of classes so far. So we've taken a really long time, but that is the luxury we have. We can take time. We can cover a lot of the important subjects. And it'll be faster once we continue, well, with the verses to come. It's just the nature of these texts that they provide a lot of information in the very beginning, especially the commentaries. And then later on, it goes much faster. So we'll continue next time we come together, we get together. We'll continue with the next verse, and that won't be as extensive as what we've covered as part of the first verse. But anyway, so to finish the first verse, this is also taken from Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, having talked about the fact that emptiness itself is a non-affirming negative. We've learned about positive phenomena versus negative phenomena. And then, of course, affirming negatives versus non-affirming negatives. And here, there's a brief explanation why it's so important that emptiness is a non-affirming negative. That when we take it to mind, we take to mind a non-affirming negative and not an affirming negative for that matter. I mean, well, or the positive phenomena, even worse. But to be sure that what we're negating is inherent existence and nothing appears to the mind. Nothing is suggested in the place of negating inherent existence. Okay, so therefore, I'll read. It is important to understand that the 4 reasons of the diamond slivers reasoning, as we've gone through them, does not arise. So phenomena do not arise from themselves, do not arise from something inherently different, and so forth. That these and what they establish, what do these 4 reasons establish? Well, the lack of inherent existence of arising, that all of those are non-affirming negatives. The reason that establishes non-affirming negative, that establishes emptiness. There's so many reasons. In fact, in the Mahayana scriptures and the scriptures of the universal vehicle, although the emptiness is exactly the same as described in the fundamental vehicle, so the vehicle that leads to self-liberation, it's exactly the same emptiness, but it's described in a slightly different way. It's more extensively explained in the scriptures of the universal vehicle. And more extensively mean more reasons, more different reasonings are given. So you have dependent arising, you have the fact, phenomena don't exist inherently because they're neither inherently one with their parts nor inherently different from their parts, and so forth. So there's so many different reasonings. Usually they're 5. They're described as being 5 in the, for instance, in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, but actually there are a lot more. This is just one way of getting an overall sense of all the different reasonings. So one of them is dependent arising, which is not a negative phenomenon, it's a positive phenomenon. But in this case here, the diamond slipper reasoning, well, they're non-affirming negatives, they're not positives. And of course, most important to understand is that emptiness is a non-affirming negative. Okay, so the 4 reasons of the diamond slivers reasoning are all non-affirming negatives, because by negating the different extreme ways of arising without indicating or implying any positive phenomenon, their perception does not reinforce the wrong view of reification. So their perception, like we negate just these extreme ways without suggesting anything else, then the perception of these 4 reasonings do not reinforce the wrong view of reification. The same is true, even more important, of emptiness, or the emptiness of arising here in this case is part of the diamond sliver reasoning. So emptiness of arising, or the emptiness of any other phenomenon. So this is stressed a lot, that this must be a non-affirming negative. If anything else appears to your mind, then it's not emptiness, as it is set forth in the Buddhist scriptures. If the negation of inherent existence were not so categorical, it wasn't categorical in the sense it can only be a non-affirming negative, but only the lack of inherent existence is perceived by the mind that in particular directly realizes emptiness, there would be reification. There would be, our mind would reify, that is, it would hold on to, it would get back into inherent existence. So, well, anyway, it would defeat the purpose, in other words, which it will say a little bit further down. So actually, of course, the purpose is to realize the lack of inherent existence, to overcome our reifying habit of the mind. But if it weren't a non-affirming negative, if emptiness wasn't a non-affirming negative, then the mind that realizes emptiness directly, well, there would be a reification. It would reify, it would strengthen the sense of inherent existence in the form of the appearance of inherent existence. This in turn would strengthen the root misperception, ignorance, root misperception, and thus defeat the purpose of directly realizing emptiness, which is to undermine and gradually eradicate the self-grasping mind. So in other words, if emptiness were an affirming negative, that would mean something affirmative, something positive would appear to the mind, that would appear inherently, and, well, it would defeat the purpose of realizing emptiness. Therefore, for the negation of inherent existence to be fully effective, emptiness must be a non-affirming negative that leaves no opening for the affirmation of a positive phenomenon. Because if a positive phenomenon were implied, if by negating, in the place of negating inherent existence, if something positive were implied, such an affirmation would give rise to the appearance of a conventional truth, because a positive phenomenon is necessarily conventional truth, and therefore to the appearance of inherent existence, because whenever a conventional truth appears to our mind due to the force of habit, whenever that appears to our mind, it appears as if inherently existent. That's not necessarily the case with emptiness. Well, it's not the case when you realize emptiness directly. Since only the lack of inherent existence appears, nothing appears to exist in and of itself, objectively and so forth, to that mind. And I'm saying that's the case directly perceiving, the mind that directly realizes emptiness. However, if hypothetically to that mind a conventional truth were to appear, if emptiness were an affirming negative, then of course something positive would appear to the mind. That would be a conventional truth. It couldn't be an ultimate truth. It would be a conventional truth that would appear inherently. And yeah, well, you would have the appearance of inherent existence and of the lack of inherent existence. And that would defeat the purpose of directly realizing emptiness. So emptiness, when it's directly realized, all that appears is just the lack of inherent existence. There's no appearance of inherent existence. Because otherwise, no way can we cut through the basic misperception. Okay. However, although that's the case, so that's important. That's important to remember that emptiness is a non-affirming negative, that when it appears, only negation appears to mind. However, although the term emptiness does not indicate a conventional truth in place of negating objective or intrinsic or inherent existence, emptiness is compatible with conventional truth. So we shouldn't forget that emptiness and conventional truth are in total harmony, in that one couldn't exist without the other. In fact, the ultimate truth and the conventional truth of a particular phenomenon are of one nature. It's not saying that all ultimate truth and all conventional truth are of one nature, but the conventional truth with regard to a particular phenomenon, so it's ultimate truth and the conventional truth with regard to that phenomenon, they are one nature, and therefore exist in dependence on each other. For example, a cup, if you take a drinking cup, it's a conventional truth. And so you have a conventional aspect with regard to the cup, because the cup itself is a conventional truth. And the cup and its emptiness, the cup's emptiness and the cup are of one nature, which means, therefore, the conventional truth, the cup, and the ultimate truth of the cup are inextricably linked, so that one cannot exist without the other. That's what the Heart Sutra tells us. Cup is empty. Emptiness is the cup. Well, it doesn't say cup, but it says form. We can apply this to any phenomenon. Emptiness is not other than the cup, and cup is not other than the empty. It's emptiness. So here we're talking about its specific, its emptiness. So you couldn't have a conventionally existent cup if it didn't lack inherent existence. And if it didn't lack inherent existence, you couldn't have a conventional cup. So in that way, yeah, those two are inextricably linked. Also, without first realizing the lack of intrinsic and objective existence of the cup, so without first understanding the emptiness of the cup, it's not possible to realize that the cup is a conventional truth. I mean, we can know cup, which is a conventional truth, which is different to saying, knowing that the cup is a conventional truth, recognizing it as a conventional truth. That can only be understood once we understand that the cup lacks inherent existence, that it is a conventional phenomenon, that it exists conventionally. Okay, so that it exists conventionally, that it is a conventional truth, but also that it exists conventionally, that it's merely labeled and so forth. We can only understand that after realizing emptiness. So you see, they're closely connected. If that does not refute, or that does not contradict the fact that emptiness, when it's perceived, nothing else can appear to the mind that directly realizes emptiness. Of course, before we can directly experience emptiness, we need to experience it conceptually. But the goal, of course, is eventually to have a direct experience of emptiness. And thus, it's important to understand that even at the time when we conceptually take emptiness to mind, to make sure that it's none of the affirming negations, that the kind of emptiness that appears to our mind, which is actually not real emptiness, because emptiness has to be, by definition, has to be a non-affirming negative, but to pay extra attention. Does anything else appear to my mind? Does the cup appear to my mind? Does the eye appear to my mind? While I'm trying to understand the lack of inherent existence of the eye or of the cup and so forth, it's important to pay attention to that. And then it goes on to say, well, non-affirming negatives can be divided actually into two types. Those whose object of negation exists and those whose object of negation does not exist. All right, so we can just to explain that in the context of emptiness, an example of the first type, the object of negation does exist. Well, for instance, the mind is not a physical phenomenon. The mind lacks any physicality. This is a non-affirming negative, that mind being non-physical. That is a non-affirming negative, of course, because the object of negation of physical this is a non-affirming negative because it's object of negation. This sentence is totally wrong. This is a non-affirming negative, the object of negation of which exists because its object of negation of physical phenomenon exists. Yeah, the reasoning doesn't work here. I need to change that. This is a non-affirming negative because its object of negation of physical phenomenon exists. That's not a correct sentence. But anyway, sorry, I need to adjust that. I'll do it next time. So a non-affirming negative here in this case, the mind is not a physical phenomenon, or the mind being non-physical. That is a non-affirming negative. No, it's a non-affirming negative, exactly. And it's the object of negation, which is a physical phenomenon. So the mind is just the basis. What is negated on the basis of the mind? The mind being physical. But physical phenomenon exists in general, just not on the basis of the mind. But then an example of the second type is emptiness. The previous sentence should rather be an example of the first type is the mind is not a physical phenomenon because its object of negation of physical phenomenon exists. So there's a mistake there. But anyway, I'll change that for next time. Anyway, so then the next example, an example of the second type is emptiness because its object of negation has never existed, does not presently exist, and will never exist. So the emptiness of cup, or the emptiness of the mind, or whichever basis you want to take, based on, for instance, the mind lacks inherent existence. Well, not only on the basis of the mind, but on the basis of anything else, lack of inherent existence doesn't exist. So this is different to saying the mind is not a physical phenomenon. Okay, so this distinction may be helpful. I guess it's also quite obvious. All right, then let's go on. The realization of emptiness, therefore, is not a case of destroying something that once existed. Instead, it means to cognize a characteristic of phenomena, a negative attribute that is the mere non-existence of a mode of existence that is impossible, but that our mind constantly assumes to be the case. So, of course, we can negate certain aspects that actually exist on the basis of something else. Well, we can negate them on particular objects. So being a physical object, being a mental object, you can have lots of non-affirming negatives, which when they are negated on the basis of certain objects, well, they still exist on the basis of other objects. But that's not the case with emptiness. And that's always stressed a lot in the commentaries. So don't think that emptiness is just, it's not like you destroy inherent existence by way of suddenly realizing it. It's not like it existed before, and by now understanding that it cannot exist, it suddenly doesn't exist any longer. No, it was never there. It's a total imagination of our mind. It's a total fantasy of our mind. Don't ask me why. Don't ask me why it's there. It just is, right? It's like, why do we perceive it that way? There is no answer. It's just always has been there. It's the tendency of our samsaric mind to perceive objects as existing inherently. Anyway, let's just deal with it. And let's not ask where does that come from? I mean, in the West, we like to ask this question, like, why do we perceive inherent existence? Was there ever a time when we didn't perceive inherent existence? Well, the answer is no. Well, why do we perceive in this? Why we don't? We'd like to ask this question. I mean, I guess anyone would like to ask this question, and I'm sure you've heard the response by some of the lamas when we asked too many questions, like, what's the origin? Why did we end up like this? Usually they tell this story. They say, imagine someone shoots you with an arrow, and there's this arrow stuck in your chest. And the only way to survive is to remove the arrow. And instead of removing it, you ask, where does this arrow come from? Who made it? Who shot it? What is the kind of wood that it was crafted from, and so forth, right? It would be bizarre to ask. It's like, just get rid of it. So similarly here, this cannot be answered, unfortunately. I couldn't answer it. And I guess once we're enlightened, it kind of all falls together. I mean, right now, any answer that is given, I'm saying it's existed since the beginning this time, it's pretty dissatisfactory. It's like our mind doesn't fare too well when it comes to beginningless time, endless, beginningless. Like, we're so used to kind of solidify things. This is where they start and this is where they end. It's difficult for us to have that sense of endlessness, no beginning, no end. I think it's just the nature of our mind that we want a very specific beginning. And in other religions, there are definitely attempts to explain the beginning. But is there really? I mean, is there really no beginning? Like, if you said, well, talking about Adam and Eve and paradise and so forth as one example, well, what was before God? Has God always existed? Or has someone else created God? I think the second would not be an option. I mean, like, to say someone else created, no, God has always existed. God has been there since beginning's time. So one way or another, we always end up with beginninglessness. I mean, for instance, if you move away from any kind of religion, from any kind of spiritual system, let's just take science. Let's take physics, for instance. Let's talk about this universe. How did it come into existence? The physical objects of this universe. Well, Big Bang, yeah, but was there something before that? Was there something physical? And I'm sure scientists would say, yeah, there must have been something physical there. You don't get something out of nothing. It's not like you had nothing there and suddenly there was a Big Bang and everything was there. That wouldn't make sense. So there must have been some physical objects before the Big Bang. And so again, you end up like, there always has been something physical, whether it's in the form of gases or in the form of coarse objects, atoms. I don't know enough about science to even use the terminology in the correct way. But the point is, beginninglessness makes much more sense than any other option. Of course, we can talk about the beginning of me in this lifetime. But of course, whatever gave rise to me in this lifetime, well, that had a previous person, a previous living being, and so forth. And so, yeah, it goes on endlessly with regard to there being no beginning. I mean, going back in time. And it goes likewise as to the future. The continuum of my mind, the continuum of your mind will never finish. Of course, there's an end to samsara, but there's no end of our existence as a living being, as a being who has a mind, that has a mind. Okay, anyway, having said all that, the point is nonetheless that we are stuck with this misperception of reality, that all our trouble comes from hallucinating, from having this sense phenomena exist in a certain way, but they have never existed in that way. And by negating them, it's not like we're destroying something that was there previous. For some reason, that's always stressed a lot. Okay, in order to realize emptiness, we must first investigate. And so this is important. We are afflicted by our basic misapprehension. So how we deal with this now? How are we going to deal with emptiness? Well, it's as simple as that. We start to investigate. Is there something to it? Is it true or not? Was the Buddha wrong? I mean, it's not even seen as negative to question the Buddha. Maybe he was totally wrong. Maybe he got it all wrong. Well, I'll use my own mind. I'll use my own intelligence, however limited that may be, to check whether phenomena actually exist as they appear to our different types of mind or not. And of course, it's not just about proving the Buddha right or wrong. It's about making change, unless I come to a first-hand experience, no way will I change. No way will my mind change. So there's no other way around it but to start to reflect on emptiness. Investigate whether phenomena exist as they appear to our different types of mind, or as they are perceived by our root misperceptions. So they appear to all our minds, inherent existence right now, unless you've realized emptiness directly. But let's assume we're all beginners. Like you are beginners. Let's assume you are. I'm a beginner, but let's assume you are too. So then in that case, having not realized emptiness directly yet, therefore, all to all our minds, inherent existence, of course, appears. And it is actively also apprehended by our root misperception whenever that pops up. Not all minds actively apprehend inherent existence. It appears, but it doesn't have to be actively apprehended. But it can be, of course, whenever our root ignorance, our root misperception rises. So we need to analyze. How do objects appear to me? How do they appear to me? So to catch it in the most effective way, I guess it's like when you catch an afflictive emotion in your own continuum, then you can be certain that a sense of this object, I don't know, object of our anger, object of our frustration, object of our attachment to our mind, that object seems to appear in and of, seems to exist in and of itself, not merely labeled. No, there's something within that person. There's something there. There's something here in my case. I'm always fascinated, not always, but I still find it fascinating how people take things personally, right? How someone acts in a certain way, and we often take it personally, as if the other person were to attack my own self, like as if there was something there that this person set out to hurt. Whereas the person just acts with everyone like that. But there's a sense, no, this is personal. This is something they want to affect me. It's almost like there's no one else but me, even though the person acts with other people in the same way, but that seems different. So the emphasis is much more on myself. So there's something there, inherent there, that they set out to harm, right? I mean, we all have that experience when we take it personally, although the person who behaves in a certain way, it's just the way they behave. They behave towards other people as well. But when it starts to hurt us, then we get frustrated. So why did they do that to me? Well, that is also a good opportunity to check. Is there a sense that something can be taken personal? Like there's something there? So these are just different situations. I'm just thinking of a situation that just came up about someone taking something very personal that wasn't personal at all. So this is really just an example, but of course, an example we can all identify with. But the point being to check, what is this phenomenon? So this I, this body, my body, why my? What makes it my body? Or anything else. So any other object, we catch ourselves having a sense of inherent existence, like in particular when it comes to an afflictive emotion with regard to that object. And then to subject it to ultimate analysis. As mentioned earlier, our mind has to examine whether an inherently existent house, for example, if you're very attached to your own house, right? It's difficult not to be attached to your own accommodation that provides you with security, a roof over your head, warmth, and so forth. So usually, I mean, we get attached to anything, about anything. Even we get even attached to our sickness. Oh, I'm a sick person. I mean, we identify with our sickness, and somehow in a weird way, we're even attached to that. So attachment, we're in a desire realm. I mean, attachment comes so naturally. It's incredible. But the point being, let's take a house, for instance. So there's definitely a sense of an inherently existent house or apartment or room, what have you. It exists. So if it exists the way it appears to us, well, let's analyze. Then it must be either one with its parts, different from its parts, or both, and so forth. So in this way, your mind engages in ultimate analysis. also called, this mind that engages in that ultimate analysis is also called a reasoning consciousness of ultimate analysis. Or well, reasoning consciousness of ultimate analysis. That's just pretty much a literal translation, almost a literal translation of that particular mind. So it searches for the inherent existence of the house, the way it appears to us, among its roof, walls, windows, and so on. There's something there, because the fact that you attach to it, we cannot be attached to something. We cannot be attached to a house that our mind doesn't perceive to exist inherently. You cannot be angry with someone. I mean, we cannot be angry with a conventionally existent, merely imputed person. Try it, right? Try to be angry with that person. Well, that's really difficult to do, I guess. We don't really have a clear sense of something existing as being merely labeled. But being merely labeled by my own mind, I mean, how angry can you be, right? It's just labeled by my own mind. Like, the anger is directed at something more there. It's not the mind, it's not the body. There's just an annoying person. Something seems to be within that person. Or if it's an object of our desire or our attachment, there's just this thing. It's not the face. It's not the, yeah, I like the face. I like the rest of the body. I like the mind. Yeah, I like all those. But if this other thing wasn't there, I wouldn't like the person, right? So, I mean, if the person dies, I still have the face, I still have the body, but no way I'm attached. So there's more to it. There seems to be something there. It's like, it's so difficult to define because it's not there in the first place. I mean, no wonder it's difficult to define, right? We have a sense, our mind is attached to something that doesn't exist. So it's really hard to put it into words. How do you put into words something that is impossible? But the point being that every time there's attachment, every time there's an afflictive emotion, inherent existence is part of the mind that perceives the object. Some would say it's always a misperception. Some would say it always perceives inherent existence. Some would say, no, it doesn't have to perceive it, it appears. But yeah, some go as far as saying there's always a sense to that mind. There's always the object of engagement is always inherent existence. It's always apprehended. But that's a matter of debate. But the point being, can be certain. When we're angry at something inherent there. So let's look for it. Great opportunity. The only benefit of getting angry is it gives us the opportunity to observe the object of our anger and start to look for it as being one with its part, different from its part. If it's the house we're attached to, well, try to find that house, that thing that we hold on to. And initially it's like impossible. We're not used to it. So it's just a slow process. It takes time. It's not easy. It's not like you can sit down and meditate for 5 hours and go, wow, no way. I mean, if you can do it for a few seconds or a few minutes, that's great. But anyway, when you start somewhere, so searches for the inherent existence of the house among its roof and so on. But since that mode of existence is nowhere to be found, the reasoning awareness of ultimate analysis finds only the lack of inherent existence of the house. For neither the house nor its inherent existence withstands ultimate analysis. So actually, you're not really analyzing. When you engage in ultimate analysis, by definition, you're not just looking at the conventional house. You're taking to mind the house the way it appears to your mind, as if there was something more than the merely labeled house, right? I mean, it's like, it's ultimate analysis. It's not possible that you just take the conventional house, because that there's more to it. I mean, to our mind, much more appears. That is the inherently existent I. And so by definition, that ultimate mind, that mind of ultimate analysis, always looks for something further. And it doesn't find anything except the lack of inherent existence of the object it was mainly focused on. So, well, in the case of the house, the basis being the house. So how does the house appear to my mind? Taking that appearance of that object. I mean, obviously, like, unless we've realized emptiness directly and have removed all misperceptions, every time we take a house to mind, it will appear inherently. Every time you take any conventional truth, unless you're a Buddha, this is also true for an arhat. So unless you're a Buddha, every time you take to mind, sorry, my whole construction here starts shaking and I shouldn't move too much. But anyway, every time we take to mind a conventional truth, it will always appear inherently. Therefore, when you take it to mind, you start analyzing it, you always take to mind, you always analyze that. When you engage in ultimate analysis, you engage in the ultimate analysis of the ultimate, the inherent existence of that object. But what do you find? You don't find the object. You don't find a conventional house. You don't find an inherently existent house. So all you find is the lack of inherent existence of the house. Therefore, that shows us that neither the house nor its inherent existence withstands ultimate analysis. Nothing withstands ultimate analysis. But since in this case here we focus on the house as an example, neither the house nor its inherent existence withstands ultimate analysis. And then you can replace the house for any object. Okay. Now, the meaning of these three is important. So now there are three ways of describing a certain action with regard to ultimate analysis. And this is important. This is mentioned a lot. And it's important to understand the difference between the following. So this is really what I mainly want to get at today. And it's a little difficult. Some of you are probably familiar with it, so you won't find it difficult. But yeah, for some it may be at first a little bit confusing. Being found by reasoning awareness of ultimate analysis. So being found by it. Being established by reasoning awareness of ultimate analysis, and notwithstanding ultimate analysis by such an awareness. Okay, so the awareness is always the same. It's that mind that engages in ultimate analysis. So we distinguish between these three: being found by this consciousness, being established by this consciousness, and notwithstanding ultimate analysis by that consciousness, right? Those three, they need to be explained. If the reasoning awareness of ultimate analysis that focuses on the house, okay, we're back to the house we're attached to, that appears to us inherently existent, that we may hold on to with certain minds, not all the minds, but when there's attachment, we're very likely to hold on to the inherent existence of the house. If someone wants to take it away from us, for instance, oh, my house, there's attachment, and there's definitely in one form or another, a misperception or ignorance perceiving the inherent existence of my house. Right now, apply ultimate analysis that focuses on the house. If it were to find the house or its inherent existence, hypothetically, the house would withstand ultimate analysis and not be merely designated. Okay, that's important to understand. So if something to withstand ultimate analysis means that the mind that engages in ultimate analysis finds its inherent existence. Okay, the house would therefore, if that were possible, the house would withstand ultimate analysis and not be merely designated. It would exist objectively and not depend on anything else. Okay. However, since this is not the case, the mind only finds the lack of inherent existence of the house because it establishes, that is, realizes the lack of inherent existence of the house. So you've got already, cannot find the house, right? Being found by reasoning awareness of ultimate. So the mind that focuses on the house, what does it find? The house? No. Why not? Because the house doesn't withstand ultimate analysis. What does it find? The lack of inherent existence of the house. Why? Because that mind that focuses on the house, that is concerned, or that searches for the house or its inherent existence, that being the object, well, it establishes, it realizes the lack of inherent existence of the house. So to establish here means to realize, right? So, however, what does not withstand ultimate analysis? The house, or the inherent existence of the house. Is the house or its inherent existence found by that consciousness? No. What is found by that consciousness? The lack of inherent existence of the house. Why? Because it's established, it is realized by that awareness. Does that make sense? So you've got a sense of how these terms are used: being found, being established, notwithstanding. So it finds something. That reasoning awareness of ultimate analysis does find something. It finds the emptiness of the house because it establishes or realizes it. But none of those withstand ultimate analysis. Okay, so finding the lack of inherent existence of the house means that the reasoning mind establishes or realizes the emptiness of the house. It establishes the ultimate truth of the house, so it is an ultimate valid cognizer, right? By finding the lack of inherent existence, that's the same as saying understanding, realizing, establishing the lack of inherent existence of the house. And that's why it's called an ultimate valid cognizer, because it finds the ultimate truth of the house. However, although the reasoning awareness of ultimate analysis that focus on the house finds the emptiness of the house, this does not mean that the emptiness of the house exists inherently and is not merely designated. It would mean if the house were found by that mind, if the house were found by the ultimate analysis, by the mind or the reasoning consciousness of ultimate analysis, if that ultimate awareness, if that reasoning consciousness of ultimate awareness were to find the house would exist inherently. But that is not true for the emptiness of the house. Why? Because this mind of ultimate analysis does not search for the inherent existence of the emptiness of the house, but for the inherent existence of the house, right? It's not searching for the inherent existence of the emptiness of the house. It searches for the inherent existence of the house. Okay, so that's important. So there's no contradiction saying that this mind that's focused on the house only finds the lack of inherent existence of the house. That doesn't mean that the lack of inherent existence of the house exists inherently. But if that ultimate mind that searches for the inherent existence of the house were to find the house would exist inherently, because that's what it was mainly concerned with. On the other hand, a reasoning mind of ultimate analysis that focuses on the emptiness of the house, right? You search with such a mind, not for the house, but for the emptiness of the house. Where does the emptiness of the house exist? Is it one with the house? Is it different from the house? Does it exist? Is it merely designated? Does it exist in and of itself? Where does it exist? How does it exist? Well, you can't find the emptiness of the house either. So with the mind that focuses on that emptiness, if the mind focuses on the emptiness of the house, it does not find the emptiness of the house or the inherent existence of the emptiness of the house, because neither the ultimate truth of the house, the emptiness of the house, nor its inherent existence can withstand ultimate analysis. Nothing withstands ultimate analysis. But it's important that the mind that engages the ultimate analysis with, it's important on what does it focus? What does it mainly focus on? If it is the house, it merely finds the lack of inherent existence of the house. If it focuses on the emptiness of the house, it finds merely the emptiness of the house. Well, that's important. That distinction is important. It's not difficult to understand, but it can get confusing with all the words. So going back to the mind, the reasoning mind of ultimate analysis that focuses on the emptiness of the house. So it doesn't find the emptiness of the house or the inherent existence of the emptiness of the house. Instead, the mind finds the emptiness of the house and thus establishes or realizes that ultimate truth of the emptiness of the house. All right, and so here, you've got a short summary in a sense. Well, it's with this chart. is it called a chart? Yeah, this diagram. This diagram, you can see. So the reasoning awareness, what is the reasoning awareness here? The reasoning awareness for ultimate analysis that focuses on the house. It's concerned with the house. It does not find the house. The house cannot withstand ultimate analysis. It does not find the inherent existence of the house. The inherent existence of the house cannot withstand ultimate analysis. And really, it's searching. There's no difference, really. It's not like, let's search for the house and let's search for the inherent existence of the house. You cannot really separate it. So conceptual. I mean, I just here for the sake of better understanding, I separated them, but searching for the house and searching for the inherent existence of the house are exactly the same. So neither can withstand ultimate analysis. I mean, this one doesn't even exist, the inherent existence of the house. So how could it withstand ultimate analysis? But even that which does exist, the house, cannot withstand ultimate analysis. So what does it find? It only finds, establishes, or realizes. So here, when it finds the lack of inherent existence of the house, we say, yes, it finds the lack of inherent existence or the emptiness of the house. Why? Because it establishes or realizes them. It's the same thing. Here, the focus is not the lack of inherent existence of the house, but that's what the mind finds. The focus is the house or its inherent existence. Okay. But we need to be sure that we don't confuse this with any other mind. It focuses on the house. But the reasoning awareness of ultimate analysis that focuses on the emptiness of the house, the focus is a different one. Okay. So it does not find the emptiness of the house. The emptiness of the house cannot withstand ultimate analysis. So I really just replaced the house for the emptiness of the house, because that's the focus this time. So that cannot withstand ultimate analysis, just as the house cannot withstand ultimate analysis. And then it does not find the inherent existence of the emptiness of the house, just as previously, it does not find the inherent existence of the house, because the inherent existence of the emptiness of the house cannot withstand ultimate analysis. Of course, it doesn't exist. So all it finds, it only finds, establishes or realizes the lack of inherent existence of the emptiness of the house. So it only finds, establishes, or realizes the emptiness of the house. All right. So it's just a little wordy, which is why it can be confusing. But yeah, I hope this makes sense here. This is also what Lama Tsongkhapa explains in his commentary. And it's so important going back to this terminology that is used a lot in the scriptures on Madhyamika, on describing the middle way, on describing emptiness, explaining emptiness, being found by reasoning awareness. Well, sometimes, yeah, things are found, but when they're not searched for, right? So when you search for the house, you find not the house, of course, not the lack of inherent existence of the house. So it's okay that a mind that realizes emptiness finds something, but it doesn't find the object that it's set out to find. Instead, it finds its lack of inherent existence. And in that way, it also establishes the lack of inherent existence. It realizes it. Establish means so many things. The Tibetan word establish. It can mean to realize. It can mean establishes the existence. It certifies the existence, if you like. So in this context here, it really means mainly to realize. But it can also be interpreted to mean it determines, it certifies the existence of emptiness, the emptiness of the house in this case. And then notwithstanding, nothing withstands ultimate analysis. Nothing withstands ultimate analysis. When you focus on something and you undergo ultimate analysis with regard to that object, you only find its emptiness. So it's notwithstanding ultimate analysis. I hope with this explanation of these three, this aspect is clear. Many of you probably already knew all this, but yeah, just to, in that way, complete the explanation of the first verse, which we took forever to complete. But like if you look at Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, of course, it's very extensive. gives very extensive explanation with regard to this chapter, with regard to this, not chapter, with regard to this verse. And of course, it would be best if you read the commentary yourself, of course. But I don't think there's any point to read it together. It would take too long. It's really difficult. And my point of just putting this together is really just to summarize it, to give you some core sense of what the text talks about. And then, of course, Lama Tsongkhapa goes into a lot more, it goes into a lot more detail and so forth, but we wouldn't have the time to cover all this. And if I were to cover it, it would be more of a just reading through it and not to give much explanation. So I recommend you read it on your own. Sometimes the words, the vocabulary can be a little difficult. It's the translators chose a different vocabulary that I chose. But yeah, hopefully you recognize the terms that I've used slightly differently. And I tried to use the same terminology as best as I could, but sometimes I couldn't. And so use slightly different words. But yeah, anyway, I would still recommend you to, of course, read the commentary. And that's it. So we're done with, yeah, I covered everything I've prepared. Of course, the next step is to prepare new material. But as I'm leaving this Monday, in 1 week's time, and I won't have time to do anything during that time. I need to take care of a lot of other things. But once I get to McLeodganj, I'll probably arrive there on the 12th, on the Wednesday, in about 10 days' time. And I'll try to arrange everything. I'll try to make sure I get a working internet connection, as well as, well, find a way to work with the constant power cuts so that we can have continuous class on the days we plan to have class. So Monday, I guess it is. And I think we've agreed that for the time being, it'll be at 6 p.m. Israeli time. So it's only an hour earlier than it is now, right? Is that right, David? Oh, yeah. All right. Oh, yeah. So I hope it works for everyone else. Great. Okay. So we've got a little bit of time left to do some meditation. So let's do that together. All right. As always, we start with some mindfulness meditation on the breath. Let go of any disruptive thoughts, the other mind. So let's take to mind the fact that emptiness is not a positive phenomenon, and it's not a affirming negative, but a non-affirming negative. We take it to mind. We're only negating a characteristic that has never existed, does not exist now, and will never exist. That our mind constantly assumes to be the case. It's important to stress this point. For if emptiness were not a non-affirming negative, and if we took it to mind, realized it directly, something affirmative, something positive would appear, and therefore inherent existence would absurdly appear to the mind directly realizing emptiness. Reinforcing reification, and thereby reinforcing our misperception of reality. We have to make sure that when we meditate on emptiness, to merely negate inherent existence. How do we get to such a mind? How do we generate a mind that just negates objective or intrinsic, inherent existence? By first of all, becoming aware of how the world appears to us. Allow our mind the time of conflictive emotions rising, how it apprehends the I, or the object of our anger, our attachment, and so forth. We don't get angry with a merely imputed person. We don't feel attached towards a merely imputed being. Our anger, attachment, they thrive on our sense of inherent existence. They can only function on that basis. So once we have a sense of how an object appears to our mind, especially at the time of afflictions, the next step is to engage in ultimate analysis. Because if the object such as another person or a house were to exist the way they appear to us, they would withstand ultimate analysis. That is, their inherent existence could be clearly found. Mind would be able to identify something that exists beyond its mere labeling, its mere designation. Mind would find a house, for instance, that exists separate, independent of its parts. Or a person who exists separate and independent of their aggregates. which of course is impossible. And thus our mind engages in ultimate analysis of the house. Finds neither the house nor the inherent existence of the house, but the lack of inherent existence, or the emptiness of the house. Finds the emptiness of the house and thereby establishes or realizes the ultimate truth of the house. Since that emptiness of the house is merely designated, does not exist in and of itself, the mind that engages in ultimate analysis of the emptiness of the house neither finds the emptiness of the house nor the inherent existence of the emptiness of the house. None of these withstand ultimate analysis. Instead, it finds lack of inherent existence of the emptiness of the house. And thus establishes or realizes the ultimate truth of the emptiness of the house. Include this analysis by single-pointed meditation, whatever insight, whatever conclusion you've come to. And just focus on that insight. To be able to internalize it, so that it affects you on an emotional level. Let's dedicate all the positive potential we've accumulated today here together. May this, of course, become a cause for all of us to eliminate all the misperceptions and other afflictions together with their imprints, so that we can quickly attain the enlightened state of a Buddha for the welfare of each and every sentient being. And in the meantime, may this cause our precious spiritual masters, our lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, to have an extremely long life, long and healthy life, so that they can continue to guide us through their teachings and their examples. And finally, may the virtue we've accumulated soften the hearts of those who are following the political ways of dictatorships, starting wars, and engaging in all sorts of undemocratic ways. So that the system of democracy in this world will prevail. And sentient beings will continuously live in peace. Let's not forget also dedicate towards those who are ill, like Geshe Kelsang Wangmo. May they all get soon well and completely recover from their disease and any other problems. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayers together. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. So thank you. And I'll see you again whenever I see you. I hope it won't take too long. I'm thinking 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the most. So please don't forget what we've been studying. I apologize for these breaks. We had a 3-week break before this, and then there's another one to follow. So, well, please continue with the meditations if you choose to do so, and read Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, of course, if you can. It's definitely very beneficial and helps you to gain a better understanding. And then we'll meet again, hopefully soon, probably in a different place. Yeah, well, not just probably, definitely in a different place at a different time. And so in the meantime, be well and take care.
Thank you, Geshe-ma. Safe travels.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you, Dalit.
Bye.
Bye.